Krystyna Dąbrowska, the Polish woman who killed Germans and survived Nazi camps, mid-April 1945. 2 p.m. A railway line near Leipzig, Germany. The sky is a heavy, overcast gray and the air is freezing. Inside a wooden cattle car, the stench of human waste, sickness, and terror is suffocating. Krystyna is 18 years old. She weighs less than 90 pounds. She's wearing a filthy, lice-ridden striped camp uniform. She's huddled against the splintering wooden wall, her mother, Bronisława pressed tightly beside her. They are being evacuated from the Meuselwitz sub-camp of Buchenwald. It is a death transport. The SS guards, terrified of the advancing American army, are moving the prisoners deeper into the collapsing Third Reich. Suddenly, the rhythmic clacking of the train wheels is drowned out by a terrifying, high-pitched mechanical scream. Allied fighter bombers are diving from the clouds. American P-51 Mustangs. The pilots see a German transport train, moving strategically through the corridor. They do not know it is packed with political prisoners. To them, it is a military target. The .50 caliber machine guns open up. Heavy armor-piercing rounds tear through the thin wooden walls of the cattle car like tissue paper. The wood instantly explodes into deadly shrapnel. Women scream as the carriage is ripped apart. The deafening roar of the aircraft engines shakes the floorboards. The train screeches to a violent metal-grinding halt. Outside, the SS guards slide open the doors, screaming orders in German. They fire their MP-40 submachine guns indiscriminately into the panic-stricken prisoners, trying to maintain brutal control amidst the airstrike. Krystyna is trapped in a metal and wood slaughterhouse. If she stays in the car, she will be torn to pieces by Allied strafing runs. If she jumps out, she faces the executioners of the SS. She grabs her mother's hand. She looks at the open door. The P-51s are banking for her. Another run. She makes her choice. She runs. To understand how an 18-year-old Polish girl found herself dodging Allied bullets and SS executioners on a German railway, you have to look back at the absolute devastation of her homeland and the terrifying resilience she forged in the fires of a ruined city. Born Krystyna Maria Ukleja, she grew up in the historic heart of Warsaw. Before the world caught fire, her life was composed of cobbled streets, schoolbooks, and the quiet. Security of family. But in September 1939, the sky turned black. The German Luftwaffe bombed Warsaw into submission. The Panzer divisions rolled through the streets. The brutal, suffocating occupation of Poland began. For Krystyna, the occupation was not an abstract political event. It was the violent theft of her youth. The Nazis closed the schools, systematically executed the Polish intelligentsia, and turned the city into an open-air prison. But the Polish people did not simply submit to annihilation. They went underground. Krystyna's family joined the Armia Krajowa, the Polish Home Army. This was not a loose band of disorganized rebels. It was a highly structured, lethal subterranean military force. Even as a young teenager, Krystyna was absorbed into this terrifying world of secret passwords, hidden weapons caches, and absolute unforgiving danger. She learned to hide her fear behind a blank, subservient stare when passing heavily armed German patrols. She learned how to move through the shadows of her own city. She was preparing for the day Warsaw would finally fight back. That day came on August 1st, 1944, 5 p.m., the W hour. The Warsaw Uprising erupted. The Home Army took to the streets, determined to liberate their capital and claim their sovereignty before the advancing Soviet Red Army could install a communist puppet government. Krystyna was in the Old Town, the Stare Miasto, one of the most fiercely contested and historic districts in the city. She was no longer just a courier. She was a combatant. The fighting was apocalyptic. The German High Command, infuriated by the rebellion, ordered Warsaw to be razed to the ground. They unleashed Stuka dive bombers, heavy siege artillery, and Goliath remote-controlled tracked mines directly into the dense residential neighborhoods. The Old Town quickly became a claustrophobic labyrinth of burning rubble and shattered glass. Krystyna held the line. Operating from the destroyed windows of ruined apartment blocks, she and her fellow insurgents fought a vicious, close-quarters urban war. When they had ammunition, they fired captured Karabiner 98K rifles at the SS stormtroopers, advancing through the smoke. When the bullets ran out, they used homemade grenades and Molotov cocktails, dropping them onto the engine decks of German Panther tanks in the narrow streets. Krystyna watched her friends blown apart by artillery shells. She watched her beloved city burn until the sky was choked with ash. And she pulled the trigger. The girl who used to walk these streets to school was now killing the soldiers who were trying to exterminate her people. She fought with a terrifying, numb desperation. There was no glory in the rubble, only the absolute necessity of survival and revenge. But courage cannot stop high explosive artillery shells indefinitely. By late August, the Old Town was completely surrounded. The insurgents were starving, drinking, contaminated water from the sewers, and entirely out of ammunition. The Soviet army sat across the Vistula River watching the city burn, deliberately refusing to intervene. On September 1st, 1944, the German forces finally overran their position on Kelna Street. Krystyna and her mother, Bronisława, were captured. In the brutal arithmetic of the SS, captured insurgents were either executed against a wall immediately or sent to the concentration camps to be worked to death. Krystyna and her mother were herded onto a train with 13,000 other Polish prisoners. On September 4th, they arrived at a subcamp of Auschwitz. Auschwitz was an industrial complex explicitly designed for human annihilation. Upon arrival, Krystyna was stripped of her name. Her head was shaved. She was thrown into the freezing mud and assigned to a penal labor detail. She was forced to carry massive, heavy stones across the camp for hours on end. The work had no architectural purpose. It was a calculated method of extermination through exhaustion. The SS guards beat anyone who stumbled. To fall meant the gas chamber. Krystyna focused on placing one foot in front of the other. She focused on keeping her mother alive. 2 weeks later, the shifting logistics of the German war machine saw them transferred to Ravensbrück, the notorious women's concentration camp in northern Germany. And finally, on October 5th, 1944, they were shipped to the Buchenwald concentration camp complex. They were assigned to the Muselwitz subcamp. Here, the irony of Krystyna's situation was incredibly, viciously cruel. The Polish insurgent, who had spent the summer shooting at the Wehrmacht, was now forced into slave labor at the Hassag armaments factory. She was ordered to manufacture the very ammunition the Nazi war machine desperately needed to continue the slaughter of Europe. Krystyna worked agonizing 18-hour shifts. The factory floor was a deafening nightmare of grinding metal. The air was thick with toxic chemical dust that burned her lungs. Rations were practically non-existent, a slice of sawdust-laced bread and a bowl of watery turnip soup. If she dropped a tool, she was beaten. If she slowed down, she was severely punished. But even here, deep inside the darkest machinery of the Third Reich, resistance continued. Krystyna and the other forced laborers waged a silent, invisible war. In the dim light of the factory, they subtly sabotaged the machinery. They deliberately misaligned the ammunition presses by a fraction of a millimeter. They fought back in the only way left to them, by ensuring that the bullets they manufactured would jam the rifles of the German soldiers on the front lines. Winter turned to a freezing spring. April 1945 arrived. The Third Reich was in its death throes. The American army was advancing rapidly from the west, the thunder of their artillery echoing across the German countryside. The SS camp. Commandants, terrified of being captured with thousands of emaciated witnesses to their war crimes, ordered the immediate evacuation of the Muselwitz camp. It was a death march by rail. The prisoners were packed back into the cattle cars, which brings us back to the splintering wood near Leipzig. The P-51 Mustangs roar overhead, banking for another strafing run. The train is a stationary target. Krystyna looks at the open door of the cattle car. The SS guards are momentarily distracted, diving into the drainage ditches to avoid the incoming heavy machine gun fire. This is her window. It will only last a few seconds. Now, she tells her mother. They jump. They hit the steep gravel embankment hard, the impact knocking the breath from their starving lungs. The sharp stones tear at their skin. Gunfire snaps through the air over their heads, splintering the trees behind them. They do not freeze. Fueled by pure, unadulterated adrenaline and the primal instinct to live, they scramble down the embankment. They run toward the dense, dark tree line. They do not look back at the burning train. They plunge into the forest, vanishing into the shadows of the German wilderness. For days, Krystyna and Bronisława evaded the German patrols that were scouring the countryside. They lived like hunted animals in the freezing woods. They survived on scavenged roots and the sheer unbreakable willpower to see the end of the war. Every snapping twig sounded like a rifle bolt. Every distant shout was a potential death sentence. Finally, in May 1945, near Pilsen, Czechoslovakia, the nightmare ended. They stumbled out of the tree line and directly into the path of an advancing American armored column. They were liberated. Krystyna had survived the apocalyptic urban combat of the Warsaw Uprising. She had survived the death marches. She had survived Auschwitz, Ravensbrück, and Buchenwald. She was still only 18 years old. The war was over, but the Poland she had bled for was gone. At the Yalta Conference, the Allies had effectively handed Eastern Europe over to Joseph Stalin. A brutal communist regime, backed by Moscow, was taking control of Warsaw. Her mother, Bronisława, made the agonizing decision to return to the ruins of their home city. But Krystyna knew the grim reality. As a former combatant of the Home Army, she would be viewed as an enemy of the state by the Soviet NKVD. Returning meant risking arrest, torture, and execution by a new set of occupiers. She could not go back. In November 1946, Krystyna emigrated to England. She settled in London, eventually marrying and taking the name Krystyna Dąbrowska. She lived a quiet, unassuming life, far removed from the deafening artillery barrages and the smoke of the crematoriums. To her neighbors, she was just a polite Polish immigrant. They had no idea that the woman buying groceries next to them had fought Panther tanks in the streets of Warsaw. But Krystyna kept a secret for decades. Carefully folded away in a drawer in her London home was her striped concentration camp dress from Buchenwald. It was a physical, undeniable piece of evidence of the hell she had walked through. It was the fabric she wore when she manufactured sabotaged bullets, and the fabric she wore when she jumped from a burning train. Before she passed away, she ensured it was preserved. Today, it sits in the Imperial War Museum in London, a silent, powerful witness to her unbreakable spirit. The story of Krystyna Dąbrowska forces us to confront the terrifying reality of what war demands of the young. She was not a highly trained, specialized military operative dropping from an airplane. She was a high school student who watched her entire world burn to ash and decided to pick up a rifle. She looked into the eyes of the most terrifying military machine in history and pulled the trigger. She endured the absolute worst. Extermination camps designed by human cruelty, and she refused to let them break her mind. She jumped from a moving, burning train and walked out of the ashes of Europe alive. Her story is a monumental testament to the absolute, unyielding iron will of the women of Poland. It is a reminder that the darkest chapters of history are often survived not by superheroes, but by ordinary teenagers who decide that they will simply not be erased. If Krystyna's incredible journey of survival and defiance moved you today, please consider leaving a like on this video to help us share her legacy with the world. Subscribe to the channel to uncover more intense, unfiltered histories of the women who fought back when the world fell apart. Let us know in the comments what part of her resilience inspired you the most, and thank you for helping us keep her memory alive.